What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to discuss some tips and tricks on both rim brakes and disc brakes. Now, depending on whether or not you have disc in the front and the rear doesn't really matter, because what I'm going to discuss as far as this video is pretty much just setup and what to look for in both the disc and the rim brake setup. So let's start off with the disc brakes. First, let's go over the main components. You have the rotor. There's different size rotors. Usually on bikes like this, like for street trials, you want like 180 millimeter rotors. There's smaller ones that you'll find on lower grade mountain bikes or bikes that don't need as much stopping power, but you'll find 160 millimeter rotors on those bikes. But if you want something with a decent amount of stopping power but not too much weight, 180 millimeters is fine, and that's what I have on here right now. The brakes I have right now on my bike are Shimano Saint M820s. I found that these brakes actually work pretty well. I was relatively happy with them. I've been through a lot of different front brakes and never really found anything that I actually liked, but these were the first brakes that I could actually live with. The only troubles I've had so far with these brakes, as you can probably tell, I have a zip tie and a dime in there. These brakes right now are pretty mint, like legitimately, because they have money in them. The only reason that's in there is because I like my brakes, the lever specifically, not to come in all the way to the grips. So you can kind of see where it stops right here, right about here. That's pretty much as far as I like my brakes to come in. That's already almost further than I like. And these brakes, I just find that they have an overflow right over here, and if you put too much oil in them to where they're a lot stiffer, it'll just start spurting out oil from here, letting go of the excess, which doesn't really help as far as making the brakes stiffer. If anything, it lets air in the lines, so I don't really think that was a very good design. I don't know really what they were trying to do there. I'm not talking bad about Shimano. I'm sure that there's some reason or some explanation as to why that happens or why that's happening. I don't really know, but for right now, this dime, I guess, works okay. It hasn't fallen out, surprisingly, and so does my zip tie. It also works pretty well. Now, as you can tell, I have my front brake line going through my steerer tube. Now, that can be difficult sometimes if you don't have a bike that's specifically designed to be able to do that. It did have the space in the steerer tube to fit this cable through it, but my old forks, I had Echo forks before this, the steer tube was so thick that to get the line through there was a really tight fit, so it may not work for all bikes, so you have to make sure that that's going to work for you. And then you also need a top cap that has a secondary hole in order to run the line through, because without that, you're either going to have to drill one or you're not going to be able to do it. So you have to have the ability to tighten it and run the cable through it at the same time. So it pretty much just comes out the bottom, like right here, and runs down. So that prevents you from having to spin your bars back around. But as you can tell, I guess we can make the transition to the rear brakes. The rear brakes, you can't really do that, unfortunately. So whatever you do, you pretty much have to spin your bars back where they came from. So we can't be doing bar spins, over and over without having the brake lines get tangled. So as far as rear brakes, I run Magura HS33s, and these are pretty much the go-to brakes as far as a lot of trials riders. I really like these brakes. These brakes have been on my bike since day one. It's been like 6 years now. Before this frame or anything, like most of the stuff on my bike was Echo parts, and it was like a real trials bike. So the HS33s have lasted me a while, not like these front brakes that I've been through a bunch. So moving back, the pads that I'm using, that if I ever would run rim brakes again, these are the pads that I would use. TNN makes them. They're the green pads, and they have the aluminum backings on them, and they work great. They have really good bite. They stop really well, and I would definitely recommend them for sure. The other thing you might notice on my rims is that I have a rim grind on them. You can see the little lines on there and how it's not ground like the front rims because I don't have rim brakes in the front. The way you do that is with an angle grinder. You can make those little lines on there, and I made each individual line on there, but you want to be careful not to take away too much of the rim. You want to do it just lightly, just enough to where you can get a nice rough surface on there, and that'll work really well with these pads because these pads are designed for a rim grind. They will work with a smooth rim, but they're really designed to have the grind on the rim to work properly. Now, one quick tip that I'm going to give for the rim brakes, if you find that your brakes are starting to slip even with the rim grind on there, even with the rim grind, it only lasts so long to where it starts getting smooth again. You can keep like scuffing it up with some sandpaper, things like that. But if you want insane stopping power, like I'm talking instant, like you'll most likely fall on your face off of your bike because your brakes stop so ridiculously hard. And you're also gonna most likely scare families on the side of the street when you hit these brakes, is using Coca-Cola. I actually have a stash of Coca-Cola right over here for that sole purpose. I don't really use it that often simply because I find it to stop a little bit too well for my taste, because I like to do manuals and tricks where you don't want insane bite. But if you're just looking for all-out stopping power, you can pretty much just lay your bike on its side and almost just pour the Coca-Cola on top of it, and then just ride your bike around and wait for it to start caking up and all the sugar to dry up on top of the rims. And then once you hit those rims, the sound you'll get and the stopping you'll get it's definitely something else. It's something to experience, and you can try to wipe off some of it just to keep a little bit on there, just enough to have the good stopping power, but it's pretty much whatever you want to do. Okay, so I've moved locations because my furnace just turned on. You can't hear anything. Back to the front brakes. Now, I'm just going to give a quick little tip as to how to get your caliper perfectly aligned with your rotor, because when you might put new brakes on your bike, specifically disc brakes, you want to get them perfectly aligned so that the rotors don't rub on the actual rotors. So you want to leave these two mounting bolts loose. Just thread them on finger tight and leave a little bit of space before you actually tighten them with your fingers, so that the caliper can still move freely over the rotor. And then on your actual lever, you want to squeeze your lever and hold it there with one hand, and while you're holding it, you want to tighten these bolts on here, and that will allow your caliper to self-center on top of the actual rotor. Not all calipers will do this, so give it a shot in case you're having trouble getting that aligned. The other way doing it is pretty much just by sight and tightening up the bolts individually and moving it and tightening it to get it perfect. Sometimes it's okay to have a little bit of rub. You're never going to get it perfect. The rotors aren't always going to be straight. As long as your front wheel or rear wheel moves freely, it's not a problem. So don't worry about you hearing a little bit of rubbing on your rotors. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And that concludes this video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see anything else as far as bike setup or anything along those lines. So thanks again.
This hit is Givenchy, $900 jeans, homie. All these girls be raunchy, like let me see your peen, homie. She trying to cause a scene, but I'm in Paris with my team, walking slow like I'm on lean. Damn, my nigga jewelry looks so clean. I occasionally bought in land.